We're stoked to have Jon Rittenhouse here with us to answer some of your questions about God, about the Bible. He is a professor at Biola University, and he's been answering questions about God and the Bible for about 25 years. Just quick information, we will have this, Jon will be answering some of your questions. If you guys just want to raise your hand, or actually I'll have you line up over here if there's a lot of questions. And we'll go in order, and Jon will answer your questions. And if you don't want to talk on the mic, or if you need to leave, you could go ahead and text. Where's the...
Actually, just write it on the comment cards.
Okay, actually write it on the comment cards before you leave. They're the green cards that we handed out. Also, if you wanted to get more information about Crew, which is us, Christian Club on campus, text more info crew, that's one word, more info crew, to 85005. So just want to introduce you, Jon Rittenhouse. He, like I said, is a professor at Biola University. He has spoken at over 100 universities sharing about God. He's traveled the world and spoken at European universities and other countries. He has gotten his degree in chemical engineering. He has four doctorates. Four masters. Okay, 4 masters, one being in philosophy. And he's been answering questions about God in the Bible for about 25 years. So give it up for Jon.
We'll use this, so I'll tell a couple stories, then we can do Q&A time. We'll do Q&A forever. How many were at the noon session? How many of you were at the noon session? So, good chunk of you, not everybody. So a couple of these stories, maybe I'll repeat that for those that weren't on it at the noon session. I'll give you a couple of, I'm going to start off quite a bit different. You ever play the game 2 True, 1 False? You ever play the game? Kind of get to know people better. So I'm going to give you 3 statements. 2 of them are true, 1 of them are false. Now, this will be a little bit more interesting because virtually nobody knows me here, or those that know me don't know me very well. So here's the 3 statements. I was in the top 2% of my freshman class in college out of 1,600 students. Number 2, I seriously contemplated suicide when I was in high school. And 3, I once committed a crime that the FBI was informed of. So those that are in Crew probably already know which one that is, so you can't vote. Crew people are exempt from this voting. But those that haven't heard those statements before, my speaking Crew, you guys can vote. So I'll give you 30 seconds to decide which one you think is false. One of them is false. So top 2% of my freshman class in college out of 1,600 seriously contemplated suicide in high school, and 3rd, I committed a crime that the FBI was informed of. Okay? 15 seconds left to calculate your answers. Door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3? Okay, get ready to vote. How many think number 1, top 2% is false? Top 2% in college, we have about 8 or 10 of those, okay? I always get very depressed when my students at Biola, I always vote that one in the majority. They're like, oh, you have little faith. You don't have any confidence in your professor. Number 2, seriously contemplated suicide in high school. How many think that's false? Only 1, that's it. Okay. And 3rd one, committed a crime that the FBI was informed of. How many think that's false? Quite a few. So we got a split on 1 and 3. So my self-esteem is seriously in jeopardy that you think number 1 is false. But number 1 is actually true. The false statement is actually number 2. I never seriously contemplated suicide in high school. I actually waited until I graduated from college to contemplate suicide. So, which is, that's true. Life sometimes sucks. It gets very hard. So, anybody curious about number 3?
Yes.
Okay. What was my undergraduate degree in? Chemical engineering. I made a very large explosive device when I was a senior in high school, and I set it off at the largest football game of the season with our arch rivals. So at halftime, I detonated this thing. It was about 3 feet long and about this big around. And my parents lived about 5 miles from the stadium. They heard the explosion back at my house. It rocked the windows of our house. And so as the police began to investigate, they picked up the bomb fragments. They were going to send it to the FBI headquarters to check it for fingerprints if they couldn't find out who did it. But as they began to ask around town, they asked a number of high school students, do you know anybody that could do this? So they asked about 12 different students, independent. And every time they asked, hey, do you know anybody that could do this? They're like, yeah. Who could do it? Jon Rittenhouse. They asked the next guy, do you know anybody that could do this? Yeah. Who? Jon Rittenhouse. So all 12 guys said Jon Rittenhouse. So they figured, okay, I think we got the guy who did this. So they kind of brought me to the police station and said, do you know anything about this? Maybe. So I ended up admitting to the crime and had to go to court. It was not a real fun experience for me or my parents. So the only thing all of my classmates remember about me from high school is the bomb. So that's how they refer to me, the bomb. I'm not the bomb, I'm the bomb. So that's the only thing that they remember from my illustrious high school career. So.
Was it like maybe shoot confetti or something, or just make a lot of noise?
Just make a lot of noise. I made sure it wasn't anywhere close to anybody, so I wouldn't kill anybody. I didn't want to do that, but just like things that go boom. So, it's good that I did that back then, because if I did that now, I'd probably get about 20 to 25 years in the state penitentiary for that fiasco. And I was a minor, and the judge's son had actually done a similar thing about 5 years earlier. So the judge was actually pretty sympathetic to my rather explosive personality. I was at Johns Hopkins University a few years ago, about 3 years ago. I was doing a lecture on the human person. Are humans more than just a body, or do we have a soul? I spoke to the undergraduate segment, just on campus, kind of like this type of meeting, whoever wanted to come came out. But then the next night, I actually did a formal lecture at the medical school at Johns Hopkins University. It's a very prestigious medical school. I was very privileged and honored to be there. And there was about 100 people at the lecture, most of them medical students, a couple of medical professors, and a number of guys that were actually in PhD programs in various areas, including neuroscience. And I wanted to argue in my lecture that we do have a soul, we're not just a body. And I argued from 3 different disciplines. I argued based upon scientific data, I argued based upon philosophical data, and I argued based upon theological data. I knew that in that type of secular environment, I would get a kickback because I had included in my PowerPoint presentation slides from the Bible, in other words, quotes from the Bible that actually give evidence that we actually have a soul. And I knew that because the sciences tend to be seeped in a cause and effect particle type of mindset. If it's not a particle, if it's not a proton or electron, if it's not a physical substance, then I don't want to deal with it or think about it. And so when I got to the question and answer time, I did get a lot of kickback. They were nice. But one of the guys, a PhD student in neuroscience, Raghu, I remember the conversation. I talked to him afterwards too. But Raghu says to me, he says, John, I don't think it's really valid to use philosophy or theology in this discussion because, science is really the only discipline that we can really answer questions like this about the body and about what human beings are. Science is the only discipline. Science really can give us insight to this. And he went on for about 3 minutes. And after he went on, after 3 minutes, he closed up, and I said, Raghu? It's like, yeah. It's very interesting to me that you say that we cannot use philosophy to discuss this issue, but only science. Because in the last 3 minutes, you never made one statement about science. Every single thing you said in the last 3 minutes has been philosophy. And not one thing, you didn't quote me atomic weights, you didn't talk about chiral centers, you didn't tell me if it's aliphatic or aromatic, you didn't tell me if it's straight chain or ring structure, you didn't give me any nuclear magnetic resonance type data, you didn't give me anything scientific, no scientific data you presented. Everything you said was philosophical. And he looks at me and says, you're right. And I said, I know that I'm right. And then the next guy up, one of his buddies, PhD in neuroscience, went on for about 2 minutes. And both these guys were atheists. And so because they're an atheist, their worldview has discounted and already run out of existence any non-material entity. They don't allow it into the worldview. They don't even allow it into consideration. So 2 minutes he went on, and he did the exact same thing. I called him on it too. I said, I'm not trying to be, rude or anything, but you just did the same thing Ragu said. Nothing you said was scientific. Everything that you said is philosophical. Anybody here ever been lied to? You ever been lied to? That proves that truth exists. Because a lie is a departure from something. A lie is a departure from the truth. Do you like being lied to? Do you enjoy that? Probably not, especially if you're in a dating relationship and Prince Charming turns out to be, Satan incarnate. But Prince Charming lies to you. It's not a very good deal. Lies aren't good. Some lies don't have lots of impact, I mentioned this earlier, today, I'm trying to be humorous. When your wife says to you, my wife sometimes will put on a new dress and she says, sweetheart, do you think it makes me look fat? Lie to your wife, guys. Lie to her. No, sweetheart, no. You're as skinny as the day I met you. No, it doesn't make you look fat. Just lie to her, But that's a small lie. It's not a big lie, I'm just joking. Lying's not good, but if you have to preserve your marriage, then you have to do that. I was doing a lecture at the University of Latvia, Riga, Latvia, and after the next day, I had met with some professors and students as a result of my lecture, and I was interacting with one of the math professors, and he said, I used to go to church, I used to believe in God, but I'm really not sure whether or not God exists. I said, he does, and I said, he has to because there's absolutes. And absolutes don't come out of the air, they don't come from hydrogen molecules, they don't come from water, they don't come from wind and electricity. Absolutes have to be grounded someplace. Absolutes have to be grounded in God. That's where they have to find their source. Government doesn't invent them. Majority vote doesn't determine them. And so he's listening. I said, for example, it's an absolute. What's 2 plus 2 equal? He said, well, 4. I said, how many right answers are there to the question? I said, only 1. I said, how many wrong answers are there? He said, an infinite number of wrong answers. I said, that's an absolute. That's a mathematical absolute. It has to be grounded someplace. There has to be a source of it. We didn't invent it. We simply discovered it. The math tables, 2 plus 2 is equal, 2 plus 3 is equal, 2 plus 4 is equal. Those math tables or multiplication tables or addition tables, those things were true before we ever thought of them. They were already true. We just discovered them. We don't determine truth. We discover truth. We've got lots of conflict in our culture today over truth claims, whether it's, say, religious claims, ethics claims. Here in religion, we've got all kinds of options in our world today. I think the options should narrow down to theism. Now, I did this earlier today. It's called the Kalam cosmological argument. It starts out with the premise the universe exists. I was doing a survey, Thoughts on Life survey, I call it, with a student at Valley College in San Bernardino. I'm from San Bernardino. I was doing this survey, and we get to the God question. I asked him, James, do you believe in God? He's like, no, I don't believe in God. God doesn't exist. I said, well, he actually does. And I can prove it. And that perked James's interest. He said, you can prove it? I'm like, yeah, dude, I can prove it. He's like, so you're going to quote the Bible to me? I'm like, no, I'm not going to use the Bible. The Bible doesn't so much proves God. The Bible more assumes God. And he's like, so what are you going to use? I said, I'm going to use science and philosophy. He's like, so I flipped the piece of paper over and I wrote down the universe exists. I said, James, do you agree the universe exists? He's like, yeah, totally. I said, well, if the universe exists, there's one of 2 options. Either the universe never had a beginning, or the universe had a beginning. And I asked him, he's a physics major, I said, what do you think? He's like, it had a beginning. You're right, it did. I said, well, that beginning was either caused or not caused. I said, what do you think? He's like, dude, it was caused. And I said, well, if it was caused, then we've got one of two options. It was the result of a random directionless force. In philosophy and science, that's called event-event causation. That's the category, event-event causation. One event causes another event. Like, if the wind is blowing really hard tonight, and there's a tree out here in the courtyard, and the wind blows so hard it breaks the branch of the tree off, and the wind is so strong it carries that branch into this window, and when that branch hits this window, the window breaks. Event, 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 event causation. The window broke as a result of an event, event causation. The event, branch hitting window, that's an event. Next event, window breaks. That's an event, event causation. So, if the universe was caused as a result of event, event causation, that would be a random directionless force. I'd like to use an illustration or an analogy. Do you know what happened when Hurricane Katrina hit the Home Depot lumber yard in New Orleans 3.5 years ago? Built an entire condominium complex. It framed all the houses, it laid the carpet, put the doors and the windows in, the drywall, the shingles, the roof tiles, everything. In fact, you could even choose your paint color for each one of the rooms. That's what happened, right? When Hurricane Katrina hit the Home Depot lumberyard? No. Usually in a larger audience, I'll have some brave soul. He's being offensive or rude, but somebody will just kind of shut out because I play it like I'm serious. And some guy will just shut up and say, "That's absurd!" I'll say, "Thank you for making my point for me." I was at South Dakota State using that illustration. The girl in the front row says, "Really? That's what happened?" I'm like, "No, girl." She started, I'm like, "Man, I'm really believable. You know, you're believing me. Wow." You know, it's the same thing that you get when you cross an atomic bomb with a cow. Utter destruction. So, random directionless force is not possible to produce an ordered universe. A random directionless force, Hurricane Katrina, is not going to build a condominium complex. It's impossible. It's absurd. In the same way, a random directionless force will not produce an ordered universe. But if it's not a random directionless force, there's only one other option. It has to be a personal agent. These are exhaustive categories. There's only two types of causation: event-event causation or agent causation. They're exhaustive categories. So if it's not event-event causation, it's impossible, it can't be. It's got to be agent causation. What can we tell about this agent? This creator? Well, got to be pretty smart to build a universe. Got to be incredibly powerful. Got to be capable of choice, because a decision had to be made for the universe to start to exist, because it didn't always exist. This personal agent has to be separate and distinct from the universe. One, because this personal agent existed before the universe started to have existence. Therefore, this personal agent cannot be the same thing as the universe. It's impossible. This personal agent has to be timeless, spaceless, non-material, and not simply energy. Because time, space, matter, and energy started when the Big Bang singularity started. Time, space, matter, and energy started with the Big Bang. So this personal agent has to be timeless, spaceless, non-material, not simply energy, capable of choice, separate from the universe. Separate from the universe tells us that this concept or this conclusion is actually what theism is. Theism says God created the universe and God is separate and distinct from the universe. That's theism. So I was sharing this, and I said, I was sharing this at a lecture at the University of Nebraska at Kearney. And I said, I'm sorry to have to inform you, but this syllogism, this argument, the cosmological argument, if it's a valid argument, and I'm convinced that it is, I'm sorry, but it eliminates two major religions in the world. It eliminates Buddhism, because Buddhism says there is no creator. Historical Buddhism does. And Buddhism says that the universe is eternal, never had a beginning, so Buddhism is out. And it also eliminates Hinduism, because Hinduism is a pantheistic religion. Now, if you want to be a pantheist, if you want to be a Hindu, it's a free country, be my guest. But I don't think it's true to reality. But if you want to be it's okay, it's all right. Hinduism says God and the universe are the same thing. Hinduism is a pantheistic religion. Pan means all, theism means God. Pantheism or pantheism is all is God. The sum total of the material universe is what God is according to Hinduism. That's false. Because this God, this personal agent, had to exist before the universe existed. So this gets us down to theism. There's a God, separate and distinct from the universe, who created the universe. We got three theistic religions: Judaism, Islam, Christianity. And now the discussion boils down to historical or philosophical issues. How do we decide? Do we flip a coin? Do we just pick one that we like? Like one of the students came up to me at the noon session. He says, I just want a religion that makes me happy. I said, try drugs or beer. That's cheaper. You know, if that's all your goal is to be happy, just, stay drunk forever. It'll make you happy. Or just, get buzzed on drugs. That'll make you happy. But if you're looking for truth, this is a different issue. I would rather have truth than falsity. I'd rather have truth than simply be happy. People pick religions like they pick cars or ice cream flavors at times. Whatever I personally like. We ought to be more discretionary in making our decisions about significant issues of life. We should look for truth. And in this context, Jesus makes a pretty radical claim. Maybe he's insane out of his stinking mind. It's possible. But he says, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life. Nobody gets to God but through me. Now, some people hear that statement and say, man, that's such an arrogant, egotistical, narrow-minded, bigoted statement. Who the heck does he think he is? Well, there's another option. It's not arrogant or egotistical if his statement is true to reality. When your math professor puts up on the board, 2 + 2 = 4, do you react and say, I can't believe it, you're so stinking narrow-minded! Why don't you be a little bit more open-minded about issues, huh? And the professor probably have a meltdown. Is he being narrow-minded? No, he's simply being honest. He's just being honest. 2 base 10 + 2 base 10 is equal to what? Base 10 expressed in a whole number integer. 4. He's not being arrogant, he's just being honest. Let me share one more story and then think of some questions that you want to ask. You don't have to be up here, we'll just, nothing here. I want to just share a little bit of my personal experience. Kind of my spiritual journey. For me, I was raised in a religious environment growing up my entire life. It was actually within a broad category of Christianity. And because of that, I had some basic beliefs that I bought into. I believe that God exists, He's real, Jesus is His Son, Jesus died on the cross, He rose from the grave, there's life after death, there's a heaven, there's a hell. I had those basic beliefs. But practically speaking, on an emotional basis, it was like God was way off in space. He was on planet Pluto. Oh, excuse me, Pluto's not a planet anymore. Well, Saturn or Uranus. God was way off in space, and I was down here on planet Earth. And I didn't know how to connect. When I went to church on Sunday for an hour, I felt a little bit closer to God, but there was still not any deep connection. When I was in high school, I began to ask questions about life. Why am I here? What's the purpose of life? What's going to happen to me when I die? I couldn't answer those questions. I didn't know. And when I was a junior, one of my friends sat down and shared with me 4 principles that put the puzzle piece together for me. He said, the first principle is that God loves you and wants a relationship with you. I thought, God went through a heck of a lot of trouble to build this universe. And an incredible amount of trouble to form planet Earth so that you and I can sustain existence. Humans are actually pretty fragile creatures. We need a very specific atmosphere, we need specific temperature range. We're very fragile creatures. We don't survive very well in adverse conditions. So God went through a lot of trouble to build this planet, so it's good for us as individuals and He creates us. So God loves us. Yeah, I think that's true. Second principle, he said, John, you and I are not perfect. Well, man, I'm almost cracking up laughing. I'm like, dude, this is old news. I know I've done a lot of stupid stuff in my life, like blowing up stadiums, football stadiums. I'm like, man, I know I'm not perfect. And he put a label on me, he said, and the Bible calls that sin. I'm like, yeah, I heard that before. 2 things I didn't understand. One is I didn't understand how serious my problem was. Because I would compare myself with guys my age in high school. I thought, I get drunk a little bit, so do my friends. And I swear a little bit, so do my You know, I lose my temper, so do my friends. You know, I chase the women, so do my friends. Guys, it's okay to chase the women, just don't catch them. And so as I'm comparing myself to my buddies, I thought, you know, I'm just as good as my friends. And then the thought strikes me. The standard of comparison is not my buddies. The standard of comparison is God. And I thought, God is totally good, and I'm totally not. And then the second thing about this issue, I didn't understand the severity of sin, the consequences. I thought, well, you know, sin is good. It's not that bad. You know, I don't do drive-by shootings. I don't rape people. I don't murder. I don't rob banks. I'm a pretty kind of nice guy, you know. Sure, I get into fights, get drunk, you know, do a little this and that. You know, I'm okay. And the Bible says whether I have one sin or a billion sins, the result is the same. My relationship with God is broken. And I thought, wow, I never thought of that. In fact, the Bible says for the wages of sin is death. Most of you might be familiar with the Adam and Eve story. God says to Adam, if you eat the fruit in the center of the garden, you're going to die that day. So he eats the fruit. He lives another 750 years. He doesn't die physically, but he does die relationally and spiritually. He experienced relationship divorce. God boots him out of the Garden of Eden, and his friendship with God gets broken. He experiences spiritual or relationship death, divorce. Third principle my friend shared said, John, that's the reason Jesus came to earth, was to die on the cross to bear penalty for sin. Well, I heard that a million times. Two things I didn't understand. I never thought in terms of that Jesus died for me personally. I was like, well, you know, he died for humanity, he died for the world, he died for people. But I never thought in terms of he died for me. Jon Rittenhouse, until that particular night. And the second thing, I wasn't quite sure why he had died. I knew it was a good thing. It's kind of the ultimate, you know. It's a great act of love. But I wasn't sure of the purpose of it. My friend used an illustration. He said, John, how would you pay for a $100 speeding ticket? I said, dude, that's a no-brainer, $100. He said, yeah, that's true. He said, John, how would you pay for a death penalty ticket? I said, well, I guess I'd have to die. He's like, exactly. The penalty for sin is death. There's only one way to pay it. That's why Jesus died, was to pay the ticket for you. And I'm like, oh, yeah. You have those epiphanies ever in class, you know? Prof's talking about physics or calculus or something. You're like, I mean, I totally don't understand what's going on. Then he says something, you're like, oh, yeah. You know, isn't it a good moment? I'm trying to get it finally, you know? The fourth point my friend shared, he says, John, God offers you that forgiveness as a gift. Well, growing up, I had what I call the balance beam mentality. I thought when I died, God would take this huge balance beam. On one side, he'd put all my good deeds. On the other side, he'd put all my bad deeds. If the good outweighs the bad, I get to go to heaven. If the bad outweighs the good, so long, sucker, you get shot down the tube, you get flushed down the toilet, you have to head south. And so this was my concept. And I learned that night the balance beam is completely false. It's not a true concept. If I murder somebody on campus today, say I murder some gal who's married, and I murder her tonight, but next week I save her husband from drowning at Newport Beach. Am I back down to zero? I mean, I killed one person, I saved one person, I'm back to zero now, right? No, I'm not. No matter how many good deeds I do, I'm still culpable, morally responsible for the bad action of murder. And no amount of good deeds will make up or compensate or cancel out my bad deed. I'm still accountable to a just judge to answer for my crime, my wrongdoing. So good deeds won't get us into a right relation with God. There's only one way to pay a death penalty ticket, death. That's why Christ died. And he offers it to us as a free gift. And my friend that night said, John, have you ever accepted that gift? No, I have not. I didn't even know it was a gift. I thought I had to work my butt off, and maybe God would flip the coin. 3 out of 5? Maybe it would come up heads for me. So no, I said, no, I've never accepted it. So that night he asked me, he said, would you like to accept it? I said, yeah, absolutely. So that night, April 11th, 1973, Brown Theater, Iron Mountain, Michigan, I said, Christ, I'd like to come in my life to you. I'd like to come into that relationship. I'd like to accept your gift. I'd like to enter a friendship, a forgiven friendship with you. And he was faithful to do that. He came into my life, established a relationship with me. Quite frankly, that's the best decision I've ever made in my entire life. It's had a profound impact on my life. When I started college, I wanted to be number one in my class, chemical engineering. And I actually wanted to become the highest paid consulting chemical engineer in the United States. That was my goal. But because of my relationship with Christ, my values started to change significantly. And when I graduated from college, I no longer wanted to make a lot of money or be famous. I wanted to spend the rest of my life working with the greatest men and women on the face of the planet. They're called college students. And I've been working with college students for 34 years. And I plan on working with college students for the next 34 years if I live that long. One of my friends said recently, John, how long are you going to be my friend? He said, for the next 35 years. He's like, well, why only 35 years? I said, bro, because I'm going to be dead in 35 years. That's why. And he's like, oh, okay. So, questions. We can surf the universe together. If I don't know the answer to the question, that's okay. I'll say I don't know. It's a good question. And maybe I'll know that answer next time. But questions about any topic. Dating, God, the Bible, religions, life after death, the soul, age of the universe. I may not be prepared to answer any question, every question, but go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah.
First name and go ahead.
My name's Bryce. And why is it that God seems to, if he's a perfect being, why does he suffer from, it seems like, human traits? Like he feels wrath, or he shows wrath. I don't know, I guess he shows happiness in a sense, he loves. It's kind of, I feel like that's more of a projection of ourselves onto a higher being than we.
I don't think it is. God is a person. He's not a human being, but he is a person. And as a person, he's got will, he's got intellect, and he's got emotions. Now, we're kind of screwed up in all those three areas of human beings. We don't always think rightly, we don't always choose rightly, we don't always feel rightly. But God is a perfect being, and he thinks rightly, he decides rightly, and he feels rightly. But he does have emotions, so it's appropriate in certain circumstances for us to exhibit anger, depression, joy, happiness. All those emotions can be good when they're directed towards the right thing. And so it is with God. God gets discouraged when people that call upon his name, that say name the name of Christ, and do stupid things. That hurts God. God feels grief over that. When there's great wrongdoing, God has anger over it, which is appropriate. I think of a case in the state of Wisconsin when I was still living in Wisconsin. There was a serial killer that had killed 12 young girls, anywhere from 12 to 13, 14 years of age. He would kidnap them, rape them, murder them, and leave their naked body on the side of the street someplace. And finally, the police actually captured him. And when he got sentenced, that judge was absolutely livid with him. And the judge wailed on him and said, hell is not a bad enough place for you. You deserve worse than hell. The judge was really angry. And that's appropriate. Now, maybe his comments were over the edge, possibly, but his anger was an appropriate expression of this man's wrongdoing and the severity of it. God doesn't lose control when he gets angry. You and I sometimes lose control. So if somebody cuts us off on, I-10 and, almost clips our fender and, gives us the one finger salute because, we weren't going 85 miles an hour and 65 and took on at us. I had a guy do that the other day. I was in the carpool lane. I was going 72. He's hacked off at me. So he crosses the yellow lines, cuts in front of me, and, gives me the finger, honks his horn at me, kind of like I'm an idiot, I'm doing something wrong. I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm only speeding by 7 miles an hour. Please forgive me of my crime. Next time I'll think about speeding by 15 miles an hour so I can pick up a ticket, but I'm going to mail it to you, buddy. So some of those emotions are appropriate. So God does have emotions, and he does express them. But he expresses them in a controlled fashion, and he always does so in a moral type of way. Okay. Does that help?
How do you deem it appropriate? How do we deem it appropriate through our own selves? How do we how do we know that it's appropriate in the eyes of a perfect thing if we cannot understand the concept of perfection?
Well, we may not understand everything, and it's okay for you and I to ask questions about whatever. It's totally okay. It's appropriate. But it's not necessarily appropriate for me to stand in judgment over God. That would be inappropriate. And so, I'm not the one that's going to evaluate God. God is actually going to evaluate me. So there's some things I may not understand about God. I say, God, if I was God, I would do it differently. But that's not a real good paradigm. It's not good. Anybody see God Almighty? Jim Carrey, the movie. Bruce Almighty. And when he's getting all the prayer requests and he gets frustrated, he just says yes to all of it. And what happens? Chaos ensues. And so I don't understand all the ways that God works, but He's God. It's like one of my friends says, I know two things for sure. God is, and I'm not Him. So I don't fully understand God all the time, but I want to. And that's going to be a lifelong process, okay? Somebody else, questions?
John Marie, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but how do you deal with the Epicurean paradox?
It would remind me of what it is. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. So either God wants to abolish evil and cannot, or He can but does not want to. And if He wants to and can't, He's impotent. If He can but does not want to, He's wicked. And if can and wants to, why is there?
Yeah. It's a classic one. It's like God's knowledge, God's power, God's love applied to the problem of evil. Why doesn't He do something about it? The paradox, and it's really not a paradox, but it's proposed as a paradox. You got to give something up supposedly of God's attributes. You really don't. So, if God were really all-powerful, He would have the ability to end evil. That's assuming that the way to solve evil is simply an issue of power, but it's not. Second, if God is all-loving, He would intervene to stop evil. That's not true either, because there's situations that, I'll give you an example. When a caterpillar spins its cocoon, when it transforms and it turns from a caterpillar to a butterfly, it has to eat its way out of the cocoon, and it has to struggle to get out. And if you see this suffering and this pain of this butterfly, and you want to rescue it from its pain, and you cut open that cocoon so it doesn't have pain or anguish, you've actually ended up killing the butterfly. Because in order to get the fluid out of its wings, it's got to struggle out of the cocoon to press fluid out of its wings so it'll have the ability to fly and sustain life. So pain is not always negative. Pain actually has a developmental aspect to it. God's knowledge. So we're talking about God's knowledge. If God were all-knowing, He would know how to eliminate evil. But again, the problem of evil is not a lack of knowledge, a lack of love, or a lack of power. When God created us as individuals, He had a choice to make. He could have created trees and rocks, but He created individuals. Inherent to personhood is free will. Inherent to personhood is free will. Much like inherent to squareness is four-sidedness. You can't have squareness without four-sidedness. You cannot have personhood without free will. But when you have free will, that creature has to have the ability to make free moral choices. Choices that are either good or bad. When we talk about freedom in a moral texture, we're not talking about choosing between Colgate or Crest toothpaste. We're talking about whether to be truthful or to lie, to be deceitful or to be honest, to be giving or to be selfish. We're talking about moral decisions. So, if every time I go to make a wrong choice morally, God slaps my hand, I go to steal cookies out of the cookie jar. I'm going to be hacked off at God because I want the freedom to make wrong choices. So simply because God is all-powerful, He does not have the ability to circumvent my choices because he's given me free will. Simply because God knows all things, circumventing evil is not just an issue of applying knowledge. Just because God is all-loving doesn't mean he has the ability to stop my free moral choices. Why? When you create a square, you've made it four-sidedness. When you create a person, you've created free will. And inherent in free will is the freedom to will. So, God could solve the problem of evil, but he'd have to kill all of us. If he takes all human beings off the face of the planet, evil won't exist. Not moral evil. It won't exist anymore. So, God cannot end evil, and he's got redeeming factors. So, since God is all-knowing, he's going to bring the greatest good from evil. Since God is all-powerful, he has the ability to circumvent and limit evil to a certain extent. Because God is all-loving, he wants to use evil to have redemptive effects in our life. So, at Biola, the last lecture I do for the semester is the problem of evil. I deal with this question. I spent 3 hours on it. And last semester, when I talked about it, I said, God has built into my heart personally a great desire to love people. I'm relationally driven like wildfire. And I like loving people. I like loving my wife, my kids, my friends. I like loving people. It's very enjoyable to love my people and to be their friend. I said, but I didn't get that way just kind of by falling off a cliff. The way that I got that way, as far as my development is, I had to experience a tremendous amount of pain in my life. Huge levels of pain. Rejection, and criticism, and hurt. Lots of pain. But that pain had a redemptive effect. That pain made my heart really soft and really gentle. And it made my heart really desirous to love people and show kindness to people. I would have never gotten those character qualities had I not experienced pain. So God is wise in creating the world. I think he's created this world to try to minimize evil and to maximize good. But he's created individuals with free will, and he cannot determine what free moral creatures do. He can't do that. It's impossible. Because freedom is the ability to choose. So when God created us as persons, he gave us that ability. Does that help? Should. If not, email me and I'll send you some more notes.
So is there no way, so there's only one way that we can have one way that's just happiness, and that's by God killing him? It's the only way to eliminate evil.
Yeah. I mean, he's not going to do that.
He doesn't have the ability to do it any other way.
Not with the present situation of planet Earth. God's future ultimate plan is to bring about the redemption. He wants to bring as many people into a relationship with himself. The biggest problem accomplishing that is you and me. I mean, you and I, human beings in general, just use you and I as examples. Because our tendency is we want to kind of do our own thing, go our own way, live life our own deal. You get out, growing up, I understand because I'm a parent, I got 4 kids. Tell myself, no, yes, no, yes, no. You don't have to teach kids to say no. It comes very naturally. You have to work to teach them yes. So God desires to bring as many people into a personal friendship, a redemptive relationship with himself. But he's got a problem. It's called you and I, and our choice to go the opposite way, which is a freedom again. God gives us that freedom. So, this is not the best possible world. Planet Earth is not the best possible world. The best possible world, that's called heaven. That's the best possible world. But I believe this world is the best possible way to get to the best possible world. So in this world, God has tried to minimize evil, maximize good. He's worked this planet in such a way that the maximum number of people actually come into a redemptive relationship, and the minimum number are lost. Some are lost because they say no to God. They're like, sorry God, I believe that you're there, but quite frankly, I don't want anything to do with you. A good example of this is Michael Roos. He's a Canadian biologist, evolutionary biologist, and atheist. He says, you don't understand. It's not that I don't believe in God. He said, I don't want God in my universe. I don't want him a part of my universe. I don't want any part of him. Even if he exists, I don't want him. That's a pretty clear commitment. And so, God's not going to violate his free will and put a gun to his head and say, hey, you got to come and know me, otherwise I'm going to blow your brains out. That's not a free moral choice. God doesn't want, nor can he, circumvent my freedom. If you come up to somebody, spend some time and say, hey, can we be friends? And they say, no. You pull out a gun and say, you're going to be my friend or I'm going to kill you. Okay, I'll be your friend. They really haven't made a free moral choice, and they're really not your friend, because friendship is a free moral choice. So, if God wanted to eliminate evil right now, yes, he'd have to get rid of human race. But he is committed not to doing that, because he wants to bring as many into a friendship with himself. But he's moving towards a culmination. Christianity says history is moving to a climax and a culmination. Buddhism draws history like a circle. Just keeps on repeating, it never ends. You're like on a merry-go-round forever, and it never stops. Christianity says history is moving linear in a logical fashion, and it's moving to a climax and a conclusion. That conclusion is Jesus is going to return to planet Earth, and he's going to evaluate all humans for all of human history. And whether or not they're going to enter into a forever relationship with himself, or by their own personal choice, they say, sorry, God, but I'm just not interested in doing life together with you. You're a good guy, I respect you, but I'm just not interested. I was like, hey, okay, no problem, you got your free choice. And then at that point, we're going to get the perfect world. No sin, no death, no sickness, no evil, no pain. That's the perfect world. But that's not yet. That's coming in the future. It's one of the reasons why Christians have a whole heck of a lot of hope about the future. We don't get totally depressed, we shouldn't, because we have a hope, a future hope. Now, it's not like we have our head buried in the sand, we don't want to do anything with the planet. It's kind of like, hey, let the whole place go to hell, baby, I'm just waiting for the future. No. We need to be actively involved in our society and our culture. Feed the poor. Help the homeless. Be kind and gracious to people. Be gentle. Be responsive to people. We should be involved in compassionate endeavors as Christians, which Christians historically actually have. Because sometimes Christians get beat up. Say, oh yeah, you Christian, you're yeah. Well, you know who started most of the hospitals in America? Christians did. Orphanages, Christians. Out of the first 120 universities started in America, 113 of the first 120 were started by Christians to educate people. Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Dartmouth, all started by Christians to educate people. So Christianity's done a tremendous good in culture and in society. Now, they've done some stupid stuff. The Crusades, counter-crusades, the Inquisition, Christians are capable of doing stupid stuff. We're not perfect. We do stupid stuff sometimes. But we should learn from our mistakes. Okay? Next question. Another question. Go ahead.
So, if someone does a bad thing and, goes to hell, and then devil punishes him, right? Does that make the devil a good doer? Like, is he doing a good thing?
The devil punishes him? The devil punishes who?
The person that goes down to hell because he's been doing bad things.
The devil doesn't punish. The devil is actually going to end up in hell himself. The devil or Satan is actually alive and well on planet Earth. There's a book titled by that. Satan is alive and well on planet Earth. So Satan is not in prison. He's actually free to kind of roam around the planet right now and, pardon my French, metaphorically, to raise hell, which he tries to do. I think one of the chief ways he tries to do, one of his names in the text of Scripture is deceiver and liar. I think that's how he tries to hook people, to get people away from God's lies and deceives them. So Satan is not the jailer in hell. Satan is actually in the future going to be in solitary confinement. And God has not designed hell because he's happy about it. God is not a sadomasochist. He likes to see people in pain and anguish. In fact, quite the contrary. He actually wants nobody to go to hell and everybody to go to heaven. But he's got a problem. He cannot force us into that, or can't force us into heaven. No more than I can force you to be my friend. I can't do that. It's a two-way agreement. I could offer you friendship, but you can say, hey, get lost. I'm not interested. You're an idiot, John. And you can reject the friendship, or you can embrace it. Like about 8-9 months ago, I saw one of the guys at Cal State. I work a lot with international students, and so I just spend a lot of time with internationals. I find them very warm, very responsive. And so I saw a guy, I thought, man, I think he's an international student. I went over, and he started talking, and 10 minutes in the conversation, I said, hey, can we be pumyo? Can we be friends? And he's like, yeah, totally. He's a great friend of mine. And we hang out all the time. We do all kinds of stuff together. He's over my house all the time, hanging out with my family. You know, I help him with everything under the sun. It was a great friendship. I like friendship. But when I said to him, hey, can we be friends? He could have said, no. You know, that would have been the end of it. It takes a mutual agreement. So God can't force us into a relationship. The only time we need hell is when people, or I'll use an analogy, the only time we need jails is when somebody breaks the law. If nobody broke the law, we don't need jails. It's a waste of money. We need jails and prisons when people break the law. Parenthetically, this is a little tangent. America is the land of freedom. We have more freedom than any other country on the face of the planet. We got more people in jail in America than any other country on the face of the planet. China's got 1.2 billion people. We got more people in jail in America. 1.2 million people are in jail in America. We got more freedom, but we got more people in jail. Figure this one out. People are using their freedom wrongly to such an extent we got to put them in jail. We've got gigantic social problems in this country, and they're not going to go away anytime soon. So, God wants to maximize those that are in heaven. He wants to minimize those that are in hell. But He can't force us into a relationship. He can't do it. It's impossible. It's beyond His ability. Okay, another question.
So, isn't it just saying, instead of being pretty good, it's saying, be my friend, or I'll send you to jail? Because if you don't go to relationship with God, it's going to help you. So, you're not blatantly saying you have to be my friend. It's my friend or else.
You can put it like that. I really don't think that it is, but you can set up a situation so that it looks like that. That's not God's intent. I'm trying to think of an analogy. Say that I was the only cancer doctor in the country, and you had cancer, and I could treat you. And I say, my friend, I want to treat you. The treatment is 100% effective. But if you don't, you're going to die of cancer in 3 months. Trust me. If you say, well, you know, John, you're kind of putting a gun to my head. You know, if I don't trust you, then you're going to let me die of cancer. No, actually, I'm not going to let you die of cancer. You're going to make the decision whether or not you want to die of cancer. And it's not my fault if you refuse the treatment. It's actually your fault. So God says, I would like forgive you of your sins. I would like to give you forgiveness and eternal life in a right relationship. There's no other solution that God knows how to give this to you. It's the only possible option. And you say, I'm not sure I want to do that. I think I'm going to opt out. That's it. You're going to die of cancer. This is the natural consequence of the system. Not because God designed it this way. God, again, is just hacked off like us. We don't do what He wants. He beats us over the head with a baseball bat. We've made a free will choice to make morally wrong choices. There's a natural consequence to that. It's called guilt. And God says the penalty is you've got to be separated from me. But I'm going to offer you a solution. You're dying of cancer, but I'm going to offer you a solution. If you take the solution, cancer's gone. If you don't, sorry, I apologize, but you're going to die of cancer. So that's God's. I'm trying to depict His attitude, His heart. His heart is not harsh or abrasive or mean-spirited. It's not that at all. He just has so many options available. And it's like the cancer illustration, which actually is a halfway decent illustration. And so that's His perspective. God really wants us in a relationship. Somebody else, question. In the back.
Do you answer Bible questions?
Yeah.
Okay. If I'm a devout Christian and I live a life like Elijah, will I be able to summon she-bears according
Probably not. No, probably not. Those were historical occurrences, probably not repeatable in present history. Somebody else?
Okay, so my question is this. I feel like you're trying to prove the existence of God using, or like, prove the existence of the Christian view of what God is. What is to say that, I don't know, maybe the Muslim view is the correct one, or some other religions? Why, like, assuming that God exists, why does it have to be the way Christians view it? Or why is it that your argument that way? Maybe it's because that's the way you raised, or what was the question?
If God exists, why does it have to be the Christian God? Why can't it be another option, a Muslim God or some other option? Well, theoretically, it could be a different God. That's possible. So we have three theistic religions. I think that what I shared about the existence of the universe, that God created the universe, and therefore God has to be separate and distinct from the universe, that rules out Buddhism and Hinduism. But it keeps in the mix Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, because all three say those same things.
Okay.
To get the question right.
Yeah, given that, now, I know Christians, we believe that, it's Jesus is God, right?
Yeah, correct.
But, like, all these other religions, they say, well, no, he was just like a prophet or something, you know? Like, they don't believe in Jesus. And Christians believe that Jesus is God. Then, I don't know if you get my question.
Yeah. So, belief does not determine reality. If I believe that the earth is flat, it's not. If I believe the earth is the center of the solar system, it's not. So belief does not equate with reality. So somebody can believe something, but it be false. Somebody can believe it sincerely, and it still be false. Somebody can believe something and be highly committed to it, but it can still be false. So the question is really, why should I believe that Christianity is God or right? Why not believe another option? Well, I would say because of the evidence. Jesus clearly claimed to be God. He's either a liar, he's either a lunatic, or he's Lord and God. His claim to be God is either true or false. If his claim is false, he either knew it, i.e. a liar, or he didn't know it, and he's totally crazy, mixed up, deranged, got lots of loose marbles. He's a French fry or two short of a Happy Meal. He's got some major problems. So if Jesus is a liar, that means he's also a hypocrite, because he made a deliberate, calculated, knowing deception of people. But that also means that Jesus is incredibly evil, because he told people to trust in him for their eternal salvation, knowing full well he couldn't deliver on the goods. And he'd be an incredible fool to die for what he knew to be a lie. People don't die for what they know to be a lie. When Jesus was before Pontius Pilate, or before Caiaphas, the high priest, Jesus didn't kick and scream when they sentenced him to death. He'd say, hey guys, I'm just totally joking. No. It's really not true. No. Jesus willingly went to the cross. That's not the evidence for somebody who knows that he's flat out lying. Well, maybe he's a lunatic. He's out of his mind. That doesn't fit either, because Jesus had some of the greatest ethical teaching known to man. The Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, is some of the greatest teaching on human relationships. Even secular psychologists that are atheists don't even believe God say, this is the greatest teaching ever. Napoleon Bonaparte, I read a quote from him recently, he says, I know men, and Jesus is no mere man. Jesus' life is totally composed. Lunatics have all kinds of inadequacies in their life. They're not very linear, they're not logical, they're incoherent at times, they break down under stress, they're not very composed, they're not totally together, they lose touch with reality, they have visions of grandeur. Jesus exhibited none of those qualities, so there's no evidence to suggest that he's a lunatic. But if he's not a liar and he's not a lunatic, then it's got to be Lord and God. He clearly claimed to be Lord and God. The life that he lived, the birth that his entrance into human history as a virgin birth, the life that he lived, the message that he communicated, the miracles that he performed, the death that he died, his resurrection from the grave, the fulfilled prophecies that he fulfilled, all point to the same conclusion. He is, in fact, the God of the universe. And so, Christianity has got the evidence. I don't disagree with Judaism. I agree with Judaism. Christianity is Judeo-Christian. My disagreement on the three theistic religions is Islam. Islam says Jesus isn't God. Quite frankly, I find that untenable. It's more tenable for me to say that he's a liar or a lunatic than to say that he's simply a prophet. He's never left that option open to us, that he's a prophet. Islam says Jesus was never crucified on the cross. Gee whiz, I got 28 secular sources. I have them with me right here. 28 secular sources from the book The Historical Jesus. Suetonius, Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, Josephus, all record Jesus as a real person of history. Most of them record his crucifixion. These are people that hated Christians. Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, they all killed Christians for a pastime. They're a hostile witness, but they record Jesus was crucified on the cross. These guys are CNN, ESPN, on site, videotaping. They're there on the scene. These guys all lived in the first century. Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross. Islam says Jesus never even died. Jesus wasn't crucified on the cross. We have a little small discrepancy here.
Where does it say that?
Where does it say it? Say it in the cross. I don't know. That's the viewpoint of Muslims. I've asked tons of them. I've had this conversation for 30 years with Muslims. They don't believe Jesus was crucified. So therefore, they don't believe in the resurrection. Why? Resurrection happens after somebody dies and comes back to life. So they deny all the major tenets of Christianity. That's okay. That's fine. But somebody's not telling the truth. I had a good friend, Hassan Assad. He's from Syria. Great friend of mine from Wisconsin. I've lost touch with him now. Well, you know, we talk religion and politics all the time. International students love to talk religion and politics. So one day I wrote down on a piece of paper, I said, the Quran says Jesus is a prophet. The Bible says he's God. The Quran says Jesus never died on the cross. The Bible says he did. The Quran says there's no forgiveness with substitutionary atonement. I said, Christianity says there's a substitution for your sins. I looked at him and I said, Hassan, somebody is clearly lying to us. Somebody is clearly lying to us. That is clear. I did a debate at Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach. After the debate, I was interacting with all Muslim guys. We had a great time. It's very fun. And one of the guys, he's kind of close to my age, he says, John, if I'm right about Islam, you're going to hell. I said, I appreciate that. I'm very thankful for that comment, actually. Because you actually are willing to stand up for what you believe. And I said, as a Christian, if I'm right, you're going to hell. And I said, you know, we have a lot of common ground. We both agree somebody's going to hell, and we both agree that one of us is right and one of us is wrong. We have great friendship. We have a lot of common ground, and we really appreciate one another's perspective. Somebody is clearly wrong. I'm going to put my money on somebody that came back from the dead instead of a dead prophet. Jesus Christ came back from the dead. I'm going to put my money on somebody who's got the power of life, not somebody who's still dead. I'm going to put my money on Jesus Christ. The Bible has got massive amounts of fulfilled prophecy. The Old Testament was written between 400 and 1400 years before the birth of Christ. There's 300 predictions in the Old Testament concerning the coming Messiah. Peter Stoner, who was a mathematician at Pasadena City College and later on at Westmount College, wrote a book in 1973 entitled Science Speaks. His area of expertise is statistical analysis. I was used to call statistics. I hated the class. Well, I don't want to take that class. Nothing. Mess with my brain. And so anyway, he wrote this book. He calculated the statistical probability of any man in all of human history fulfilling 80 prophecies. That chance is 1 chance in 10 to the 17th power. He used an illustration. Take the state of Texas, bury the state of Texas 2 feet deep with silver dollars. Take one silver dollar, put a red X on it, throw it into the state of Texas, mix the entire state up with bulldozers. We'll put on different pieces of paper every city in the state of Texas, put it into a tumbler, blindfold you, take one slip of paper, we'll fly to that particular city, Tyler, Texas. It's in East Texas. We'll fly you to Tyler, Texas, and we'll drive around a chauffeur limousine. Anytime you say stop, we'll stop. Get off the limousine, blindfold, you reach down 2 feet deep with silver dollars, take one silver dollar. The chance that you'll get the red X silver dollar is the same chance that any man in all of human history will fulfill 80 prophecies. Stoner goes on to say, what's the chance of 48 prophecies being fulfilled? 1 chance in 10 to 157th power. Take 1 inch of electrons, count them at 250 per minute. It would take you 19 million years to count them. Take 1 cubic inch of electrons, 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch, counting at 250 per minute. It would take you 19 million times 19 million times 19 million years to count them. 6.21 times 10 to the 21st power years to count it at 250 per minute. Take one electron, put a rad X on it, throw it in the cube, mix it up, blindfold yourself, reach down, take one electron. The chance that you get the rad X electron is the same chance that any man in all of human history would fulfill 48 prophecies. Jesus never fulfilled 8 or 48, he fulfilled 300 out of 300. That proves that somebody knew what he was talking about who wrote that Bible. There's a divine intellect behind that Bible. How much fulfilled prophecy does the Quran have? 0. Book of Mormon's got prophecy. How many of them came true? 0. Bhagavad Gita, Hindu scriptures, how much fulfilled prophecy? 0. Christianity, hundreds of prophecies. How many of them came true? Related to Jesus? 100%. Ezekiel chapter 36 predicted that Israel would be dispersed 2 times and then become a nation the 3rd time. Israel got dispersed in 70 AD. There wasn't, I'm being hyperbole here, I'm exaggerating. There wasn't 2 Jews in the same city any place in the world. That's hyperbole, it's over-exaggeration. But my point is that Jews were just dispersed all over the face of the planet. And then in 1948, against all odds, every political science theorist said, fabulous, incredibly stupid. Israel becomes a nation again. I never heard something so stupid in my life. 1948, Britain granted independence to Israel in 1948 and gave them a piece of land. And the United States followed and recognized them as a nation. All the forces of heaven and hell tried to wipe Israel off the map in the face of the planet. But it's never taken place. That was a prophecy predicted 600 years before the birth of Christ. And every political scientist said, that is absolutely absurd. That the Jewish people are going to have a nation again? They're like, I've never heard something so foolish in my entire life. Well, just wait, it did. It happened in 1948. So the Bible's got all kinds of these predictions that have come true, which gives me credibility that God has actually spoken. Because God doesn't want us to miss his message. So it would stand to reason that a supernatural God would use miracles to confirm his revelation, his information to people. That's exactly what we find in the Old and the New Testaments. Tons of miracles. And we've got evidence for it. We've got evidence in archaeology for it. Whether it's the walls of Jericho, or the parting of the Red Sea, or the decimation of the armies of Egypt. There's stuff in secular history. One of my friends just said, I took my Bible to a ancient history class, and he's like, prophets say things I look up in the Old Testament. I'm saying the exact same thing. Surprise, surprise. It's very credible. Another question. Around church.
So, I guess what's your view then on the fundamental difference between Catholics and Protestants, following just the Bible and following the actual church?
There's a lot of common ground between Catholics and, say, Protestants. My mind doesn't tend to think in those categories, but I know that's categories for lots of people. There's tons of common ground. Both Protestants and Catholics believe in the Trinity. They believe Jesus is God, born of a virgin, Jesus died on the cross, rose to the grave, heaven and hell is real, the Bible is true. They all agree with that across the board. The conflict, now I'll give you a little insight to my life. The first 20 years of my life I was Roman Catholic. Now for the next 35 years I've been not Catholic. I would categorize where I'm at now as evangelical Christian. So I've got experiences on both sides of the street, so to speak. The biggest problem I have had with my background in Catholicism is that Catholicism doesn't give great emphasis that entering this relationship with Jesus is a gift. So as I expressed earlier, I don't know if you're here for it, but I shared kind of my personal spiritual journey. And I talked about this balanced beam mentality. I thought if my good deeds outweigh my bad deeds, I get to go to heaven. If the bad outweighs the good, I can flush down the toilet and I have to head south. The balance beam is totally a false concept. That's the concept I have. I got an article I gave to one of my friends here earlier. I have another one if you'd like a copy of it afterwards. But it's entitled, If You Were to Die with the Father Let You Into Heaven. It's actually written by a Catholic author. It was published in a Catholic magazine. And it starts off by saying something like, well, and the subtitle is, if he does let you into heaven, it won't be because you're nice. And then the article starts off with saying, hey, we're Catholics, we know the right answer to the question, don't we? And the writer says, actually, I don't think we do know the answer to the question. Because Peter Kreeft, who is a professor at Boston College in Boston, which is a Roman Catholic school, says the vast majority of his students don't know the right answer to the question, even though they've been through Catholic education from kindergarten through 12th grade. And he says, he quizzes them, and he says they all fail the question. What does it take to get into heaven? They all say, well, you know, I'm a nice person. Well, you won't get into heaven by being a nice person. Good works won't get you in. Because the penalty for sin is death. There's only one way to pay a death penalty. That's by death. That's why Jesus died. And he offers that to us as a free gift. He doesn't give it to us because we give him $20. Somebody comes to your birthday present and gives you a nice birthday present, and then you pull out your wallet and say, hey, dude, how much did it cost you? I'll pay you for it. That's an insult. That's an insult. A gift is free. A gift is to be accepted and to be thankful for, not to try to buy it from somebody or pay for something. This is the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues with Catholicism is this. And it's kind of interesting, most people wouldn't know this. All the people that formed the, quote, Protestant church, they were all Catholic priests. John Calvin was studying for the priesthood. Martin Luther was a Catholic priest. John Huss was a Catholic priest. William Tyndale was a Catholic priest. They were all Catholic priests. They were trying to reform the church because the church had drifted. It had drifted massively. From one that was very right on with Augustine, who said that man is lost in the depravity of sin. He needs God to rescue him by God's grace. But the church began to drift, and by 1000 AD, the church had really lost its moorings. And then in 1500, 1517, Catholic priests began to kind of revolt a little bit and say, things got out of hand. We've got to bring this thing back to where it should be. And that's where the blow-up happened with the Reformation. Somebody else, a question? Do you have a question too?
So God teaches us to, everyone's equal, right? So
To what?
Everyone's equal. God created us, everyone's equal. And why does, a person has the authority to make laws on earth?
God created all of us equal. Why do people have the authority to make laws? God has created us all equal as far as our value and worth. And the reason why we have equal value and worth is because we're created in God's image. But God wants to have civil governments so that we can have ordered societies. Now, in a democracy like America, we actually elect our officials, or we try to. And God gives authority to government officials. Now, they can misuse that authority. In other countries, you don't get to vote. Well, you get to vote, but there's only one person on the ballot. Vote for Joe or vote for Joe. If you don't vote for Joe, we're going to throw you in jail. In the former Soviet Union, it was a crime not to vote, but there was only one person on the ballot. So Russia would always boast, or the Soviet Union would always boast, hey, we had 99.8% people vote in our country. Well, yeah, dude, yeah. But if they don't vote, you throw them in jail. So it's really not saying anything. So God does put people in positions of authority in culture so as to encourage the well-being of people in culture. They're not of more value in the sense of their inherent value. They might have a more influential position. God's okay with that, especially if they're governing morally. God doesn't like people who misuse their authority. Okay.
Going off that.
Go ahead.
So you're saying that God puts people in authority? Would you say that then most people that are governing our country or have a position in our country have been put there by God? When I believe that many of them are actually there because of, for example, special interests or corporations or some other stuff like that?
Yeah. God doesn't control the political process, and he doesn't necessarily handpick who he wants. He allows for a cause and effect process. So he can work with anybody that's in office, and we don't know all those workings. It doesn't even have to be a person that even believes in God. God still, the book of Proverbs says, God directs the king's heart like streams of water wherever he wishes. But God's not saying, okay, this is the guy that I'm going to put into the presidency, this is the guy I'm going to put in the Supreme Court, this is the guy that I'm going to put as mayor. God doesn't do that. I assume that he might be able to, but I don't see that in pages of Scripture. I don't see that in the course of human history. So God allows for people to be in office through a societal process. So he's not orchestrating, he's not determining everything. He's not like a puppet master controlling the puppet. There's a lot more freedom and choice in that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, is it fair to say that atheists can be just as good, if not sometimes better, people than Christians? Because I feel like atheists, they can all still be good people. They do good things just for the sake of being good, right?
Yeah.
Can we say that they can be just as good?
Can atheists be just as good as Christians or others that believe in God? Yeah, they can be. They don't have a really good reason to be good. Because
for the sake of being good. They don't have to satisfy God or something like that, I guess.
That's true, but there's going to be more motivation for those that are Christians, that believe in a moral God, like Jews, Muslims, Christians, that believe in a moral God. There's going to be a lot more impetus and motivation to do that which is right. Not out of fear, but out of the knowledge that there is a moral universe that exists, and that there's a desire on the part of God for us to make the right choices. I'm much more motivated to do good things than I ever was before I became a Christian. Massively. And then there's a deeper question, and that is, yes, atheists, pragmatically, a particular atheist could live as morally as a Christian. That's possible. It's not likely, but it's possible. But then I would raise a question. The atheist really doesn't have any motivation for being good. In fact, if he's really an atheist, there is no such thing as good. Good doesn't exist. And evil doesn't exist.
No, there still must exist, regardless if you believe in something or not.
Well, it does because God,
you're
there is
human.
a God that exists.
Well,
But
maybe
if I'm an atheist and I'm consistent with my worldview, there is no such thing as good and evil. Those concepts don't have existence. That's talking about unicorns and Santa Claus.
It's a natural thing. I think it's a natural thing for humans to be good.
I
Humans
think
want
it's a
to be
natural
good.
thing for humans to be bad.
Well,
It's
maybe
natural.
that too, but
Both are true, but within an atheist worldview, you're not allowed the concept of good and evil. So if they say, well, I'm nice to my neighbor, that's good, and I say, dude, what do you mean good? Your worldview doesn't allow for this concept of goodness. There is no such thing.
it does though, because we interpret it as good, right?
But there is no good. Not if you're an atheist. There is no such thing. You might have a feeling that something is good, or option A is better than option B, but you're delusional. You're delusional because atheism does not have any moral structure. I'm happy when atheists love their children and don't rob banks. I love it when atheists are kind and compassionate and generous and giving. I love that. But they don't have a good reason for doing it.
I just want to clarify things. I don't know if he knows what you mean by that, but can you talk about objective moral law and where a Christian like myself would get, all right, why does that exist versus the order of philosophy with an atheist, it must come from a higher being.
Ethics aren't embedded in protons or neutrons or electrons. Ethics isn't found in water or tree bark or in grass. Ethics aren't determined by voice vote. Otherwise, if it was 1941 and you were Japanese American, we'd put you in a concentration camp in Arizona. Or if it was 1858 and you're African American, we'd determine you're only 3/5 of a person and you can be bought and sold as property. Voice vote doesn't make something morally right. You don't get ethics from government. You don't get ethics from water or protons. Ethics have to come from something above society. It has to transcend all cultures and all societies. That is only found in God. So if God did not exist, there's no place where ethics are actually grounded. There's no place to get them from. So when the atheist says we ought to be good, I'm like, I like what you say, but you're not entitled to your statement. If you don't believe in geometric figures, don't tell me you want to draw a circle or a square or a triangle. Because if geometric figures don't exist, you can't draw geometric figures. So, only because God exists can we have a source of absolute truth. And out of that, we get absolutes. As Aristotle said, there's got to be universals in order to have particulars. The universal is grounded in the nature and the character of God, in the existence of God. And if God doesn't exist, there is no right and wrong. There's things that you prefer, there's things that you have preference for, but there's not anything that's objectively right or wrong. It just doesn't exist if there isn't a God. So it's like the book I mentioned earlier today. Can man be moral without God? And the answer is no. No, he can't. Because if there is no God, there is no morality, there is no right and wrong, there is no good. There's things that you prefer, but it's not objectively good. It's just a preference. It's socially expedient. It propagates the species. It results in an ordered society instead of a chaos society. But it's not right or wrong in a moral sense. You can't get that without God.
Question on how do you feel about the Bible slavery and
Slavery and the issue of women. Biblical view, the text of Scripture does use the word slave. It's the Greek word doulos, which gets translated also servant. Most of the, quote, slavery in the Bible was actually mutually arranged, the vast majority. So if I have a massive debt to you and I can't pay you the debt, I come to you and say, can I be your slave for 5 years to pay off the debt? You say, yeah, no problem. Let's do it. So now, by mutual agreement, I become your slave or your servant. So the massive amount of, quote, slavery or servitude in the Bible is actually this type of financial debt arrangement. A little bit of it is actually when, one nation conquers another nation, and they take captive the people of that nation, they bring them back into their own country, and they make them slaves because of military conquest. That also exists in the Bible. But most of the slavery that is talked about in the Bible is actually a fairly amiable. It's not, the perfect case scenario, whether I'm conquered by another nation, I'm pushed into slavery. But actually, it's a fairly positive type of situation. When they captured those slaves, they didn't torture them, they didn't cut their heads off until after the battle. In the battle, they didn't cut their heads off. But when they brought them back captive, they actually were treated halfway decent. The downside in our culture is, unfortunately, people who claim the name of Christ use those verses, I think, out of context to justify slavery, not only in America, but throughout the world. They justify that. One of the major players that actually helped to end slave trade, first in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, and all of its possessions, was William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was a highly committed Christian. The movie Amazing Grace is about his life. And for 21 years, he fought Parliament in Great Britain to introduce legislation to end slave trade. And he almost got killed, and people wanted to take him out. They were thinking about taking out a contract on his life. They were so hacked off. Because slave trade was very profitable, very morally wrong, but very profitable, because you have free labor costs. And Wilberforce he fought adamantly, and he actually was thinking about going and serving as a pastor. He wanted to go and be a pastor of a church, and some people intervened and says, God wants you in politics. And he struggled like crazy, and some of his influential Christians around him said, he's deciding to get politics or pastorate. And they said to him, we suggest that you can do both. That you can serve God by being in politics. And so he decided to stay. He ended slavery in Great Britain, and that had a very positive domino effect in the world. Some Christians misread and misapplied the Bible and tried to promote slavery. That's a great curse on our nation of America. It's a sad fact. When I think about it deeply, I just start bawling. I'm like, how in the world? I can't fathom this. How did Christians miss this deal? Every major denomination in America split during the 1950s over the issue of the white-black issue. Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, almost every denomination split over this issue, which is a sad commentary. The Baptists split into the Northern and Southern Baptists. And much to their discredit, the Southern Baptists, I think it's a great denomination, said we don't want blacks in our church. Ooh, baby, that was a major sin, huge sin. And so this is a great black eye on the part of American culture, and unfortunately Christians were a significant part of the problem. That's very disheartening to me as a Christ follower. Very disheartening. The issue of women, actually, the Bible actually has a pretty lofty view of women, demonstrated significantly in the life of Jesus. Jesus had women around him all the time, and he allowed them access to his life. In Jewish culture, even to this day, in Israel, a husband is allowed to divorce his wife, but a wife is not allowed to divorce her husband. That's not real good. It's not equitable. Now, I do realize historically that the majority of the world, women have been put down. In Indian culture, in Hinduism, if you're a serial killer or you do something gravely bad in your life, you get reincarnated as a woman. That's the view of Hinduism. Jesus Christ actually elevated them. I made a comment when I was speaking at Ripon colleges, where Ripon Good cookies and Speed Queen dryers and washers are produced in Wisconsin. When I was speaking at the college there, I made a comment in one of my lectures that said, every time Christianity enters a culture where Christianity is not the predominant religion, two things happen from a sociological standpoint. One is the economic status of people increases, and secondly, the view the status of women actually is increased. Well, there's a feminist studies professor, a woman, feminist studies, there at the college, and she did not like my comment, largely because she did not like Christianity, and she thought Christianity was a big put down for women. So in the Q&A time, she went after my hide. She got in my face, she was really ticked off. And before I could answer her comment, a girl, happened to be a Christian from Malaysia, jumped into the fray and kind of verbally got in front of the professor and said, "You don't know what you're talking about." John is right. I come from Malaysia, a culture where Christianity is not the predominant religion. And when Christianity entered my culture, those two things actually happened. And as a Christian, my status in my society actually increased because of Christianity. And she shot this professor. I stand by my two comments. Christianity has not been perfect. It hasn't always done the right thing. I mean, individual Christians have been. But Christianity is a religion influencing culture. Economic status goes up for people across the board, and the view of women actually is elevated. Is it where it should be today in culture? Probably not. We have adequacies in lots of areas. But I, as a Christian, would like to be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And I'm working to try to be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. That's a great challenge, because I'm a flawed person. So I still lose my cool at times on the highway when somebody cuts me off. I want to take out my 9mm gun and shoot. I don't have a 9mm gun. I don't carry it because it's safer if I don't carry one, because I get ticked off at times. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to do the right thing as much as possible. That's my obligation as a committed Christ follower. I need to be doing it.
And also with that, is it like the idea that things have changed nowadays where they're trying to make women nice compared to how they're trying to seem more equal in society?
I think we are.
And so would you kind of say that you're actually more looking for preferences rather than an objective idea?
We're more, what is the word of the preferences? What's the idea?
Like, our preferences nowadays is that women should be equal in all society as compared to before. The Bible was like a major part of society, they weren't as equal. So
That's true. They in first century, they definitely were not equal. In fact, even when the Bible was written, the New Testament was written, in that particular culture, women were not allowed to testify in a courtroom. Their testimony was considered worthless. The Quran says a woman's testimony is only worth half of what a man is. That's not a very good view of man. It's a very degrading view of man. The disciples who wrote the New Testament, when they recorded the first witnesses to the resurrection were women. They recorded that. That was not advantageous for their position, because in that cultural setting, women were not considered valid testimony. But the disciples recorded women as the first witnesses. Why? Because they were the first witnesses, and those disciples, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were truth tellers. They told it as it was, irregardless of how the culture would react to it. So again, Christianity elevates the status of women. Jesus did, The disciples did it in their writings, and but there is some role. There should be some role distinction. When I was at the University of Maryland, I spoke on the occult and witchcraft. And Q&A time, a gal stood up. Her name was Kathy. She was involved in witchcraft. She identified herself as a witch. She said, "John, I'm a witch. As an evangelical Christian, what is your viewpoint of women?" And I said, "I'm going to make a statement, Kathy. Please don't shoot me. Give me 1 minute before you react. If you don't agree, you can dialogue with me." She said, "Okay." And most of the time, witches and sometimes some women in society are pretty amped up about Christianity because they think Christianity gave a bad deal. And Christianity is a put down of women. That's actually, I don't think, accurate, but she had this attitude. I could see it. She was kind of a little bit on an edge. And I thought, metaphorically, I think she's got her grenades ready and her shotgun ready. If I don't give her a right answer, she's going to kill me. So I'm like, oh, my life is flashing before my eyes here. So I said to her, "Kathy, do I think men and women are equal?" I said, "No, I do not." If you look at Genesis chapter 1 and 2, it says that God created Adam first. And then I think he made the improved model. So I don't want to lower women to the position. She dropped her guns, metaphorically speaking. She totally got confused. She's like, "You really believe that?" I said, "Well, I kind of do." I said, when I got married, my wife and I, my wife said she wanted 6 to 12 children. It's true, she did. She said, and I said, "I want 3 to 5. After we had our first 2 kids, my wife said, "I would like to renegotiate our contract." And she said, "I would like you, John, to have the next 2 children." I said, "I would really like to help you out." No, I wouldn't like that. "I'd really like to help you out, sweetheart, but I can't do it. You have a higher and more valuable position by being able to gestate and give birth to children. I don't have that ability. So my wife has got more value, but she's also got a different role. Just because she has a different role doesn't mean she's of less value." And sometimes in our culture we don't realize there can be some role distinctions between the sexes. And I'm using one that's very blatantly obvious. Giving birth to children. I don't have the ability to do this. So my wife has got a role that I cannot assume. I don't have the ability to assume. And I think that's a more prized position. She may not think so. After the second kid, when we experience labor and delivery and pain, it's like pooping out a bowling ball. It's not exactly, kicking in, And so, hence the Jewish proverb, impossibility, although it has more content than I'm suggesting of this, but there's a Jewish proverb that goes, "Thank God I was born a man. With labor and delivery, I'm thankful I don't have to deliver babies." That's not a fun quote. Anybody else? Other questions? Other topics? Go ahead.
As a Christian, a lot of people ask, why should I not just, right before I'm about to die, say that I accept Jesus? And I'm wondering if in heaven, are there higher rewards for closer relationship with Jesus? Or as far as rewards in heaven go, are there?
There are rewards in heaven. The emperor declared Christianity to be the state religion. It's kind of curious. He was praying to God. He didn't know who God was, but he's like, "God, what religion should I make to be the state religion for the Roman Empire?" And he saw a cross in a vision. He saw a cross. And he said, "Well, I guess God's giving signs of Christianity." So he adopted Christianity and played a real minor role in some things. But he had a false belief. His belief was that at water baptism forgives all your sins. It's false. But because of that belief, he actually waited until 10 minutes before he died. He was on his deathbed, he was about to crow, and they literally threw buckets of water on him to baptize him, and then he died. So some people have this notion, I'm going to live like hell or do whatever, and then 5 minutes before I die, I'm going to come into a relationship with Christ, and I'm going to go to hell. That is possible. The downside is, one, you don't know when you're going to die. That's a downside. Two is, when you continually make choices, it develops your character. So by saying no to God, no, it now becomes increasingly difficult for me to actually say yes to God. And then second, I think you're missing out on some positives. If you wait until you're 80 years old before you come into a relationship with Christ and get forgiveness, you've missed out on 80 years of friendship and relationship. Gals, do you want to be married to Prince Charming for 3 days? And then you die? No, you'd like to be married to Prince Charming for all of life and enjoy this person, So there's benefits to making the choice. So there's no guarantee you'll be able to make it. None whatsoever. But I once in a while, I don't hear that very often anymore, but once in a while I'll hear that.
Is it true that the Bible describes heaven to a certain extent as actually just being in relation to God, like you are in God's presence, and when you are held, you are translated as you are not in God's presence? Is that related to this question?
I'm not sure it is, but I'll deal with it. But I wanted to also answer your comment about rewards. There is rewards in heaven, but the reward is not, whether you'll be there or not. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10 says, we must all appear before the bema seat or the judgment seat of Christ. It actually uses a different Greek word from the word in reference to, say, Revelation chapter 19 and 20, where it talks about the white throne judgment. It's a different Greek word. And so the bema seat or the judgment seat of Christ is, and it says in the following verses 10 and 11, it says, we must all be recompensed for deeds in the body, whether good or bad. It's talking to believers. So when we get to heaven, God is actually going to reward us. Maybe you get the hotel suite with the jacuzzi and the pool in it, and somebody else has got the kiddie pool. But there are going to be rewards. God is going to acknowledge our efforts, and He's going to acknowledge us for those efforts. It's not like somebody's a super Christian, somebody's a dirtball. Everybody's equal in heaven. They all have equal relation with God as far as access. But here's a side note. I believe that we're going to enter heaven largely how we leave planet Earth. There's some details with this. When we hit heaven, God's going to take away all our residual imperfections. I'm no longer going to have any imperfections. I'm not going to be tempted to sin, or to do wrong, or to get angry, or to have bad thoughts. It's all going to be gone. But I'm going to enter heaven largely like I leave planet Earth as far as my relational capacity. God wants us to grow in our relational capacity with Him and with people. And our relationships with people can actually develop and cultivate a higher capacity for relationship. So when we enter heaven, we have a relational capacity, say from 1 to 1,000 of 25. We're going to only be able to enjoy God at a 25 level, not a 30 or 1,000 or 100 level. So there's benefits of cultivating this relationship with Jesus Christ. Because when we enter heaven, we're going to have that relational capacity, largely what we have now. So some people are going to enjoy God a lot more because they've developed deeper relationship with God now. And that's true in friendships. You can get together, maybe have a threesome or a foursome, and all the guys or all the gals that are hanging out, you enjoy each other, you're all friends. But the people who spend more time together, sharing their heart, thinking together, talking, and doing life together, they develop a deeper bond, and they know each other. They have a deeper relationship. Same is true with us. The heaven and hell question. God is actually in hell, but He's in hell in a different way than He's in heaven. In heaven, God's characteristics of love and joy and peace and mercy and kindness and gentleness are very present. In hell, some of God's attributes that are present are judgment and anger and wrath. So I say to people sometimes, I'll ask them this question. Christians, I usually ask. I don't ask non-Christians. I'll say, is God in hell? And they say, no. I'll say, is God omnipresent? Is God present all places? And they say, yes. I'll say, is God in hell? They say, no. I say, is God omnipresent? Yes. Is hell a place? Yes. Is God in hell? No. Is God omnipresent? Yes. Is hell a place? Yes. Is God there? They're like, dude, He's got to be. I'm like, yeah, He is. And they're like, the brain is kind of burning up. They're like, wait. I've been told that hell is the absence of God. No, hell is the absence of friendship and relationship with God. But God's attributes select attributes are actually exemplified in hell. Well, how can God keep people in hell for eternity? Because people in hell continue to sin. It's like a guy that goes to jail. He's in jail for 25 to 30 years, but he can get parole. But while he's in jail, he murders somebody. So he gets another 25 to 30. But while he's in another 5 years, he murders somebody else in jail. So he continues to sin. So he continues to rack up years to a sentence. That's going to be true in hell also. People are going to continue to sin. They won't be able to murder because they're in solitary confinement. They'll be able to think bad thoughts, have anger, jealousy, rage, all kinds of bad thoughts. So they're going to continue to sin.
So the offer we have here on earth no longer exists once you go to heaven.
Yeah, that's correct. As soon as you die, program over. Time out. There's no more time left in the clock. No more plays to be played, no more shots to be shot, no more balls to be pitched. Game over. Time is off the clock. So, yeah.
Is that really kind of fair at all? Think about it, because honestly, what we are on this planet, we can be people who don't know, like, if God is real or not.
Yeah.
So it's kind of unfair to say that in this planet where there is a possibility of being a little child to be sent to this planet forever, and that's like sending a baby away just for something you did tonight.
Christians are undecided about the issue of, say, babies, but let's up it up as far as the age level. Let's say 14 or 15. People that age know right and wrong, maybe not comprehensively, but generally. But this issue, this is a big issue in our culture. Everybody, Christians, non-Christians, everybody across the board. Fairness. Is God really fair? Is he really fair to send anybody to hell? Look up the word fair in the dictionary. If you're taking a Calculus 3 class here at the moment, and you get 0 on all your quizzes and all your tests, what grade should you get if the professor is fair? Correct, an F. So, fair means you get what you deserve. Right? You get 100% in the class, you should get an A. You get a 0%, you ought to get an A.
Is it fair to get through torture for just a few years? The short little time we had here, compared to spending forever, somewhere like that.
The answer actually is yes. It's not a very tasteful, not a very pleasant thing to consider to take in, but yes, it is. So if I've disobeyed every one of the 10 commandments, broken every one of the 10 commandments, if I've committed lots of sins, hundreds of thousands, am I guilty or innocent? I'm guilty. And if I'm guilty, I should get the punishment that my crimes deserve. So if God is fair, actually he would send everybody to hell if he were fair. Because that's what I truly deserve. I've rebelled against God, I've broken his laws. He deserves to punish me for my crimes. Now, the good news is that hell has actual gradation. All the punishment in hell is not equal. Punishment in hell is actually meted out based upon the severity of the crimes. Each person is actually going to be in solitary confinement. But the level of punishment that they experience is actually going to be equal to the level of their crimes, both the severity and the number of the crimes. So that's the good news. But the bad news is, I really deserve to be judged. I deserve to get the ticket. But God in his graciousness says, I don't want you to have to pay the ticket. I want to provide forgiveness for you. And I'm offering it to you. If you accept it, I'm going to pardon you. Andrew Jackson, during Andrew Jackson's presidency, he became acquainted with a man. I don't know the guy's name. I got it written in my notes, but I don't have it memorized. The guy was convicted of horse stealing. In America in that time, that was punishment by death. So he had been tried. He was actually given capital punishment. He was going to be hanged. And Andrew Jackson, I don't know what the motive was, but he wrote out a presidential pardon, sent it by a personal escort to the prison. He told the prisoner, I got good news for you. The President of the United States just pardoned you. The guy said, tell the President I don't want his pardon. And the escort said, I'm sorry, you don't have a choice. The President's pardoned you. You're free. He said, I don't want it. That little conflict went to the U.S. Supreme Court. This is a true story. Went to the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court said a pardon is only a piece of paper. It can be accepted or rejected. That horse thief rejected the presidential pardon, and months later, he was executed for his crime. That's an illustration of God. It's like, look, I want to pardon, I want to forgive you. But you and I have a choice. We can say no to it, and then God's hands are tied. He can't force us into a relationship. Very background.
So, as Christians, we pray, like it says in the Bible, pray for all things. We pray asking God to do things for us. Why, if God's like all powerful, He wouldn't change His mind. Anything we say can't change His mind. So praying is unnecessary.
I would disagree. I think prayer is necessary, and prayer can be effectual. In the Psalms and also in Exodus, God said to Moses at one point, I'm going to destroy them. I'm so ticked off at these people. They never obey me. I'm just going to wipe them all out, and I'm going to start over again with Moses. And Moses intercedes for God. He intercedes on behalf of people and says, you can't do this, God. You can't do it. All the Egyptians are going to say, you're a terrible God. You just brought us out here to kill us, and you're not a very good God, and it's not going to look good for you. The text of Scripture says, God changed his mind. And he changed his mind because Moses interceded on the behalf of the people. So the text actually says prayer can be effective, and you can actually change God's mind. Now, you can't change his mind about everything, but there's some certain things that are contingencies in God's mind. If you do this, I'll do this. If you do this, I'll do this. And so it's an open ball game. I'll give you a simple illustration. If my kids don't ask me to take them out for breakfast, I don't take them out for breakfast very often. But when my son or daughter says to me, Papa, will you take me out for breakfast tomorrow morning? Absolutely, I'd love to, sweetheart. So if they ask me every single week, I'll actually take them out every single week for breakfast. James chapter 4 says you ask, you don't have because you don't ask. James 4:4. You don't have because you don't ask. So God says, hey, ask. And then the same verse, but the next phrase says, you ask and you don't receive because you ask with wrong motives. God wants our motives to be proper, and he also wants us to ask. And I tell people that are new into the relationship with Jesus, I say, God really likes to do things for his new children. God really wants to show his new children that he's real, he cares about you, and he wants to be involved in your life. I do this in my friendships. When I say to my friends, man, I'm committed to you, I love you. I'm looking for ways to demonstrate that to you. I think God is too. He's looking for ways to demonstrate that to us. And one of the ways he does is he answers our prayers. And so I think he's very, very involved. Very involved. I can't change his mind on some things, God, would you make squares 3-sided instead of 4? God, would you not, do this or that? There's some things that God has already decided on. It's not going to change his mind. No amount of pressure is going to change it.
Well, I don't know if you already covered this because I came about an hour afterwards. What's your take on homosexuals and religion?
That's my time to stop the lecture and say I'll answer that in another lecture. So I'm probably not going to deal with it tonight. Man, how are we doing? Time-wise?
It's like
5.
we got 3 minutes.
We've got 3 minutes. Anybody else? Questions?
Just as a quick one to kind of follow up on the heaven hell thing, is Dante's Inferno accurate, would you say?
I don't know. I've not read it. I know bits and pieces about it. It's kind of interesting. Dante did not have a real good perspective on Roman Catholic Church. He's kind of pretty hacked off. In fact, there's one point in the book where the Pope has a ring of keys, and the Pope goes up to the pearly gates and tries every one of the keys in the pearly gates to unlock it, and none of the keys work. And this was just a cataclysmic thing to write in Dante's culture. That would get you killed really, really fast for writing a piece of literature with that kind of content in it. It's kind of like the equivalent to the Muslim world is Solomon Rushdie wrote a book, Satanic Verses. He talks about why some of the Quran is actually written by Satan. which is interesting because Muhammad actually admitted it in the Quran. I don't have the reference memorized. The Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran actually took out a contract on Salman Rushdie's head. So the first one that kills him gets $2 million. Kill him because he said something negative about the Quran. And so Dante said this about the Roman Catholic Church, about the Pope, which culture that he wrote it, your life expectancy might be a little bit short or problematic. It's saying that kind of comment in the culture that he wrote it in the time period that he wrote it, because people didn't go below that.
Cool. Thank you, John, for just answering some of our questions, or all of our questions. It's 10 o'clock, so we're going to have to turn off the mic. But we have these green cards that we'd love for you to fill out. Some of the people in this shirt have them also. There's a question. Question number 2 says, what unanswered questions do you guys have? Definitely fill that out. We'll get back to you, and we'll follow up with you. Also, if you guys want to know more about Crew, we have weekly meetings on Thursday at 12 o'clock at the BSC. And we have Throne Bible Studies at 8 o'clock Monday nights here. This is where we meet. So if you guys are free, definitely come check it out. But yeah, that ends our event.
Thanks for tonight. Thanks for coming out.